The room was there for 37 years. That's the part I can't get past. Not the screen, not the visitor log, not even the fact that someone had been using it. The room itself. It was built into the third floor of the building in 1987, and somehow every document that should have acknowledged its existence simply forgot it. I know how that sounds. I worked security there for 7 months. I walked past that door hundreds of times, and if you had asked me on the night I found it unlocked whether there was a room behind it, I would have told you no, because officially there wasn't. But there was. And you need to understand that before I tell you what was on the screen. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't an investigator. I was a night security officer. Mostly, the job was walking around a building after everyone else had gone home and making sure nothing had caught fire. You'd be surprised how much of security work is listening to machines, air conditioning units, elevator motors, the little electrical hum that comes from a building when there are 600 people inside it during the day and nobody after midnight. You learn what normal sounds like. That matters later. At the time, I worked 12-hour nights. 7 in the evening until 7 in the morning. My station was a small desk beside the ground floor reception area. There was a vending machine behind me that sold coffee in plastic cups for £1.20. It tasted like someone had dissolved a burnt biscuit in hot water. I drank it anyway. I kept 2 packets of salt and vinegar crisps in the bottom drawer of my desk, because the vending machine sometimes jammed after midnight. That was my life. Nothing dramatic, nothing interesting, just rent, bills, night shifts, and a building that I knew better than most of the people who worked inside it. The building had 12 floors. 4 companies occupied the upper floors. The 3rd floor was different. According to the directory, it was empty and undergoing refurbishment. I'd been told that on my first week. 3rd floor's dead. That's what my supervisor said. Don't worry about it unless you see contractors. I never saw contractors. Not once. No plasterboard, no ladders, no drills. No skips outside, nothing, but I still patrolled it. That was part of the route. Every hour, I took the lift to 3, walked the length of the floor, checked the emergency exits, checked the fire extinguishers, then came back down. It became automatic. By the 7th month, I could have done it half asleep. If this is your first time here, stay. This story earns it, because there was something about that floor I hadn't noticed. Not because it was hidden, because I had stopped looking. These are the kinds of things that don't make sense until suddenly they do. The 3rd floor had 2 corridors, south side, north side. The south corridor ended at a fire door. The north corridor continued farther. I knew that. What I didn't know was how much farther. It was 14 meters. I measured it later. At the time, I would have guessed maybe 5 or 6. That's how buildings fool you. A long corridor doesn't feel long when you're walking it every night. You notice doors, fire extinguishers, lights. You don't notice the distance between them. One Tuesday night, sometime after 2 in the morning, I was walking the north corridor when one of the lights flickered. I stopped. That wasn't unusual. The building had old fluorescent fittings. I waited. The light came back on, then went off again. I heard something behind me, a sharp, metallic sound. I turned around. Nothing. I walked back toward the sound. There was a door open near the stairwell. For about 3 seconds, I thought someone was standing behind it. Then I realized it was a mop bucket. The bucket was leaning against the door. Its handle had fallen over. That was the noise I'd heard. I actually laughed, quietly, mostly because I'd been awake for 19 hours. I shut the door. Then I noticed something. The north corridor continued past the point where I thought it should end. There was another section I'd never paid attention to, and at the end of it, there was a door, plain gray, no sign. No number, no handle label. I had walked past it dozens of times. I assumed it was a utility cupboard. That was the first wrong detail, not the door. The fact that I couldn't remember ever seeing it open. Four nights later, I found the door unlocked. I remember that clearly, because I checked it twice. The first time, I pushed the handle down. It opened. I let go. It closed. I stood there. Then I opened it again. Inside was a room, not a cupboard, not a plant room, a proper room. Carpet, white walls, air conditioning, one chair, a screen mounted on the wall, and nothing else. The room was colder than the corridor. Not freezing, just controlled, the way an office feels when the air conditioning has been running all day. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. The screen was already on. It showed a street, a residential street. No sound, no movement, just a fixed camera view of a row of houses. I stood there, watching it. I remember thinking the image looked slightly wrong. Not distorted, just too clean. Like a live camera feed being watched by someone who had no reason to let me see it. I took out my phone. I photographed the screen. Then I noticed the chair. There was something sitting on it. A visitor log. I picked it up. 37 entries. 37 different handwriting styles. Different pens. Different dates. But every entry had the same purpose, written beside the visitor's name. 2 words. I'm not going to repeat them. Not in this recording. I don't want those words spoken aloud. That's not superstition. It's simply a decision I've made. I closed the log, put it back, and that's when the screen changed, not the picture, the timestamp. It jumped backward by 11 minutes. I checked my phone. My phone hadn't changed. The screen went back to normal. 11 minutes. I stood there for another 30 seconds. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. I left the room, locked the door, and went downstairs. I told myself somebody had access to the building that I didn't know about. That was the explanation I used. It was a good explanation. For about 12 hours. Then I looked at the floor plan. The room wasn't there. Not just missing from the security plan. It wasn't on the fire evacuation plan. It wasn't on the refurbishment drawings. It wasn't on the property management floor plan. Nothing. I measured the corridor the next night. 14 meters longer than the south side. 14 meters. The exact length of the room. If you had been walking that corridor every night, would you have noticed 14 missing meters? I hadn't. I reported it. Properly. Written report. Time. Location. Photographs. Everything. 4 days later, I was dismissed. The termination meeting lasted 6 minutes. They gave me a document, a non-disclosure agreement. I signed it. I didn't understand what I was signing. Later, a solicitor told me there were serious questions about whether it was enforceable given the circumstances. But by then, I'd already started looking into the company that managed the building. That's when things got worse. The management company had an address registered with the authorities. So I went there. It was a mail forwarding service. The receptionist checked the company name, then looked at me. She said she'd never heard of them. I asked about the address. She said dozens of companies used it. I went outside, sat in my car, and thought about the room, the screen, the 37 names, 37 years. Then I contacted someone I knew who worked in digital forensics. I showed him the photograph. He enlarged the screen. He checked the image and told me something I hadn't considered. It wasn't a recording. It was a live feed. The street on the screen was real. He found it. I drove there 2 days later. I parked around the corner, walked to the street, and stood exactly where the camera appeared to be looking from. I remember the smell of wet pavement. Someone nearby was cooking onions. There was a television playing behind an upstairs window. Normal things, completely normal things. And yet I had the same feeling I'd had inside that room. Like I had arrived somewhere, slightly too late. I turned around. There was a car parked behind me, dark color, engine running. I recognized it had been in the office car park the night I found the room. I know how this sounds. I know exactly how this sounds, but I didn't approach it. I walked away. I didn't look back. The building was constructed in 1987. I eventually found the original architectural drawings. The north corridor was 14 meters longer than the south corridor. It had always been that way. The room wasn't added later. It wasn't part of the refurbishment. It wasn't an illegal modification. It was designed into the building. From the beginning, 37 years. The room had been there for 37 years. And nobody I spoke to wanted to explain why. I still have copies of the drawings. I still have the photograph of the screen, I still have my original security reports, and I still remember the visitor log. 37 entries, 37 different people, the same 2 words. I sometimes wonder what happened to those people, whether they were visitors, employees, witnesses, or something else. I don't know. And that's the part I have trouble with, because the room wasn't abandoned. Someone was paying for the electricity. Someone was maintaining the temperature. Someone was keeping that screen running. Someone was reading those visitor entries. Someone had access. And whoever that person was, they knew that room existed. They knew where it was. They knew nobody else was supposed to know. If you're still here, you already understand why this story bothered me. Subscribe if you want the next file. There's another report I kept from the same building. It concerns the basement. I haven't decided whether I'm going to talk about it yet, because there is one thing I haven't told you. Last week, I drove past that residential street again, the one from the screen. There was a car parked outside the house, dark color, engine running, and I recognized it. It was the same car I'd seen in the office car park the night I found the room. I didn't stop. I didn't get out. I just drove past. And the strange thing is, I don't think the car followed me. I think it was already there. I'm going to stop recording now. I need to make a phone call.